Pablo Escobar. Pablo wasn't just a drug lord. He was a billionaire outlaw who turned Medellin into the world's cocaine capital. Born in 1949, he started as a small-time hustler, selling fake diplomas, stolen cars, even tombstones, before discovering cocaine. By the early 1980s, his Medellin cartel controlled nearly 80% of the global market, earning him over $400 million a week. He buried money in fields, burned stacks to keep warm, and lost millions each year to rats chewing through his hidden cash. But behind the wealth was a trail of fear. Escobar ordered the eliminations of judges, journalists, and politicians. He declared war on the Colombian state, planting car bombs and hijacking planes. To the poor, though, he was a hero, building homes, soccer fields, and handing out cash like a king blessing his people. When authorities finally found him in 1993, he was fatally hit on a Medellin rooftop while trying to flee barefoot across the tiles. Some say police killed him. Others insist he pulled the trigger himself. Either way, Escobar's empire fell, but his myth still towers over Colombia's history. Carlos Lehder. Carlos was the rock star of cocaine trafficking, half businessman, half lunatic. Born in Colombia to a German father, he started as a petty car thief before realizing the real profit wasn't in cars. It was in cargo. Partnering with George Young, he turned Norman's Cay, a tiny island in the Bahamas, into a smuggler's paradise. Private planes landed on its strip loaded with Colombian white powder headed straight for Miami. Lehder lived like a Bond villain, blasting Nazi speeches through loudspeakers and guarding his island with armed patrols. At his peak, he was worth hundreds of millions and believed he could reshape Colombia into a narco nation. He even formed a political party calling for U.S. extradition to be banned, a move that almost worked. But paranoia and cocaine don't mix. His empire crumbled when allies turned and authorities closed in. Captured in 1987, Lehder was extradited to the U.S., where he cut a deal to testify against Panama's dictator Manuel Noriega. From island ruler to prison cell, Lehder proved one truth. In the black market, power burns fast and leaves nothing but dust. Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela. He was the brains behind the Cali cartel, the quiet empire that outsmarted even Escobar. Born in 1939, Gilberto started as a taxi driver in Colombia before realizing there was more money in cocaine than in passengers. Alongside his brother Miguel, he built a network so organized it ran like a Fortune 500 company. The Cali cartel didn't rely on chaos. It relied on control. Instead of car bombs, they used bribes, laundering their billions through banks, soccer clubs, and even pharmacies. At their height, they supplied up to 80% of the world's cocaine, all while keeping a polished public image as legitimate businessmen. But even the smartest schemes crack under pressure. In 1995, Colombian forces raided the cartel's headquarters, arresting Gilberto after weeks on the run. He tried to negotiate, but the U.S. wanted him. Extradited in 2004, he spent his final years behind bars before dying in 2022. Gilberto proved you don't have to be violent to be dangerous. Sometimes the calmest man in the room runs the biggest criminal empire. Miguel Rodriguez Orejuela. Born in 1943, he quietly engineered one of the most efficient criminal networks the world had ever seen. Miguel was the definition of control: cold, patient, invisible. While Escobar made headlines and enemies, Miguel built systems. He organized fleets of cargo ships, bribed customs officials across 3 continents, and laundered billions through shell companies and fake pharmaceutical chains. The Cali cartel wasn't a gang. It was a corporation with departments, ledgers, and executives who clocked in and out. Every dollar, every gram, every shipment moved through Miguel's command. To him, chaos was weakness. He believed discipline and anonymity were the real weapons of power. And for a while, they worked. The money flowed clean, the politicians stayed quiet, and the world barely noticed. But in 1995, the illusion cracked. Police raided his penthouse and found him hidden behind a false wall. The architect of order trapped in his own creation. 10 years later, extradited and cornered, the man who built an empire of silence finally learned what it sounded like when it collapsed. Jorge Luis Ochoa. He was one of the founding fathers of the Medellin cartel, the businessman who made cocaine global. Born in 1950 into a wealthy ranching family, Jorge Luis Ochoa didn't start as a gangster. He started as a trader. When he saw the profit in cocaine, he treated it like any export: supply, logistics, and partnerships. With Escobar, Carlos Lehder, and Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, he helped build a network that turned Colombia into the world's main supplier. But while his partners chased fame and chaos, Ochoa preferred the shadows. He managed transport routes, bribed officials, and kept the cartel's finances steady when others lost control. When the violence exploded in the late 80s, he was the one pushing for negotiations, trying to trade surrender for protection from extradition. It worked for a time. He served a short prison term in Colombia, then quietly slipped out of the spotlight. Unlike most of his allies, Jorge Luis Ochoa didn't die in a shootout. He retired, wealthy, forgotten, and living proof that in the drug war, survival is the rarest prize of all. La Madrina. They called her the cocaine godmother, and she earned every bit of it. Born in 1943 in Cartagena, Colombia, Griselda Blanco grew up in the violence of Medellin's streets, where survival meant learning cruelty fast. By her 20s, she was already smuggling cocaine into the US, turning everyday objects into secret transport systems. Underwear, furniture, even baby strollers. Miami became her battlefield. She didn't just compete with men, she dominated them. Blanco ruled with paranoia and precision, ordering targeted eliminations over debts, betrayals, and sometimes for amusement. Her cartel poured tons of cocaine into America, earning her hundreds of millions, and the fear of everyone who crossed her. DEA agents called her La Madrina, and even Escobar reportedly kept his distance. But her empire couldn't outrun its own blood. Arrested in 1985 and extradited to the US, she spent nearly 2 decades behind bars before quietly returning to Medellin. For years, she lived in the shadows, until one afternoon in 2012, 2 bullets outside a butcher shop ended the life of the woman who once ruled Miami like a queen with no mercy. Roberto Suarez Gomez. Long before Escobar made headlines, Roberto Suarez Gomez was already the king of cocaine. Born in 1932 in Bolivia, he came from a wealthy cattle family and used that fortune to build something far darker. In the 1970s, he founded what was known as the cocaine coup, funding military officers who helped him turn Bolivia into a narco state. His organization supplied cocaine paste directly to the Medellin cartel, making him one of Escobar's earliest and most important partners. Suarez wasn't just a trafficker, he was a businessman with a country in his pocket. Politicians, soldiers, and even police owed him loyalty. At his peak, he controlled over half of Bolivia's economy through the drug trade, earning the title, the King of Cocaine, long before Hollywood gave it to anyone else. But power built on fear doesn't last. When US pressure mounted, his allies turned, and in 1988, he was arrested. He served time, later claiming he'd done it all for Bolivia's economy. When he died in 2000, his empire was long gone, but his blueprint for narco power lived on. Wilber Jabon Varela. From hitman to kingpin, Wilber Varela's rise showed just how brutal Colombia's drug world could be. Born in Tuluá in 1957, he started as an enforcer for the Cali cartel, feared for his calm precision. When the Cali bosses fell, Varela stepped into the vacuum, founding the North Valley Cartel, a syndicate that would soon dominate the cocaine routes once ruled by Escobar. He built his empire through discipline and terror, controlling armies of hitmen and corrupt officials while expanding his reach deep into Mexico's cartels. Unlike Escobar's explosive violence, Jabon preferred quiet efficiency, assassins instead of car bombs, payoffs instead of headlines. But every empire fractures. Paranoia grew, allies turned rivals, and the North Valley Cartel collapsed into a civil war. Varela fled to Venezuela, hiding under the protection of corrupt officers. Then, in 2008, it ended. His body was found riddled with bullets in a luxury resort, killed by his own men. After years of building an empire of fear, Jabon learned the last rule of the drug trade: no one dies clean. Victor Patino Fomeque. He was known as El Químico, the chemist, a nickname that fit perfectly for a man who turned drug smuggling into a science. Born in 1957, Victor Patino Fomeque began as a police officer before switching sides and joining the Cali cartel. His insider knowledge made him invaluable. He built trafficking routes, managed shipments through the Pacific, and specialized in hiding cocaine so well that even customs dogs came up empty. When the Cali bosses fell, Patino didn't crumble. He adapted. He aligned with the North Valley Cartel and kept the money flowing, but his empire drew heat. Arrested in 1995, he served time in Colombia, then was extradited to the US in 2002. Behind bars, he made the one move that terrified everyone. He started talking. His testimony helped dismantle parts of the North Valley network, and one by one, his former allies were hunted down. When he was finally released, dozens of his relatives and associates had been murdered in retaliation. In the world he helped build, loyalty ended the moment he opened his mouth. El Mexicano. For Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, power wasn't about wealth, it was about fear. Born in 1947, he came from a poor ranching family and clawed his way into the Medellin cartel through sheer ruthlessness. Nicknamed El Mexicano for his obsession with cowboy hats and mariachi culture, He brought a warlord's mentality to the cocaine trade. Gacha didn't deal in diplomacy. He built private armies, trained mercenaries, and wiped out rivals with terrifying precision. He turned parts of Colombia into his own kingdom, funding militias and corrupting politicians to protect his roots. His reach extended far beyond the jungles, feeding cocaine to Mexico, the US, and Europe. But the same violence that built his empire eventually doomed it. After years of massacres and bombings, the government made him their top target. In December 1989, soldiers ambushed him near Tolu. Surrounded and refusing to surrender, he fought to the end. When the gunfire stopped, El Mexicano lay dead beside his son, an empire gone, erased by the same chaos he unleashed on the world.